Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into something absolutely fascinating. We're exploring the vibrant, intense, and surprisingly complex subculture of traveling football fans. Specifically, we're going to look closely at why diehard supporters of Sheffield Wednesday pack onto trains and buses every other weekend to follow their team across the country, often at great personal expense. You really have to wonder, what drives that level of absolute devotion? Well, let's dive right in and find out. Picture this for a second. You've been stuck in terrible traffic for hours. You've been redirected by the police, but finally, you step into the away end of a massive stadium. The noise on opening day is electric. The atmosphere is incredibly tense. It is literally an intense cauldron. That's the sensory, adrenaline-fueled world of the traveling supporter. For them, it's not just a game, right? It's a completely immersive, high-stakes environment. To really understand this world, we're grounding today's explainer in some solid academic rigor. We'll be drawing heavily from a brilliant ethnographic thesis by Ian Woolsey out of Sheffield Hallam University. It's called Away from Nothing. Woolsey actually spent years embedded with traveling Sheffield Wednesday supporters to unpack the sociology behind their immense, unwavering dedication. So, how are we going to break this all down? First, we'll look at the Sheffield Wednesday identity. Second, the modern football dilemma. Third, seeking the aesthetic thrill. Fourth, building a mobile home. And finally, anchors in a liquid world. All right, let's start with part one, the Sheffield Wednesday identity, looking at those deep roots and rivalries. The sheer historical weight this club carries is honestly fascinating. They were founded way back in 1867, and initially they were actually a cricket club, just trying to keep their players together during the winter. That makes Sheffield Wednesday one of the oldest clubs in the world. By 1889, their fierce rivals, Sheffield United, were formed, and that sparked the famous Steel City Derby. Now, the modern era has seen some massive highs, like twin cup final appearances in 1993, but also some really intense present-day struggles, bouncing around between leagues. And yet, despite a long absence of any major silverware, the loyalty of their traveling fan base remains absolutely staggering. That loyalty is deeply rooted in working-class civic pride. You see, Wednesday, who eventually became known as the Owls, was the older traditional club. They were founded by market traders who literally had Wednesdays off work. United, the Blades, sprang up 22 years later at Bremo Lane, and initially they drew a newer crowd. This established a fierce rivalry based on local pride, which created a really profound, enduring identity for Wednesday fans that has been passed down through generations. Moving right along to part two, the modern football dilemma and the rapidly changing landscape of the sport. So the crucial question is, why do these fans go to such extreme lengths to travel to away games today, especially when modern football has become so incredibly expensive and heavily regulated? I mean, following structural shifts in the game, particularly after 1989, there's been a massive push toward this modern consumer spectator model. That's a model where fans are expected to be seated, passive, and basically treat the game like a quiet theater show. But the traditional traveling fan? They operate completely differently. They want to stand. They're motivated by fierce loyalty and collective community, and they absolutely crave a raw, loud, partisan atmosphere. To understand how these fans manage to keep that raw spirit alive on the road, Woolsey's research breaks their motivations down into three core sociological pillars. First, we have aesthetic intensity, the thrills and the carnival atmosphere. Then, cognitive belonging, the shared knowledge of the tribe. And finally, moral resistance, that deep loyalty and defiance against modern commercialization. Okay, let's unpack that first pillar in part three, seeking the aesthetic thrill, or the carnivalesque. So what does this thrill actually look like in practice? Well, the research describes it as a Dionysian release. Think of it kind of like a carnival. Traveling provides this intense emotional and sensory release that heavily regulated home games simply don't offer anymore. Fans hit the road searching for novelty. It's about loud singing, heavy drinking for those who partake, and just a profound sense of freedom. It's an adrenaline rush. It's a playful, deeply cathartic escape from the mundane routines of everyday work life. Conjuring this kind of magic requires specific, often rule-breaking behaviors, but they are deeply understood within the tribe. We're talking about persistent standing, even when the stadium is officially all-seater. It involves hostile yet entirely mutual and understood banter with rival fans. It's about arriving early to explore uncharted cities and new pubs, ultimately generating that intense electric cauldron of noise we talked about at the very beginning. They are literally the active creators of the spectacle, not just passive consumers of it. Which brings us to part 4, building a mobile home and the cognitive tribe. This is all about the psychological need for community. Sociologists use terms like hermeneutic community or a bund. In simple terms, this is a highly emotional, tight-knit network of individuals. What makes them a community isn't necessarily living on the same street. It's being bound by unspoken, shared cultural codes. When these fans travel together, they're effectively building a mobile family. They don't need to explain the rules to each other, you know? They just tacitly know how to act, when to sing, and how to belong.
And this mobile home is built through really strict, comforting routines. Step 1 is orchestrated group travel on trains or coaches, just sharing the journey. Step 2 involves the pre-match putt rituals, filled with inside jokes and shared history. And step 3 is the collective defense of the club's identity once they're actually inside the ground. They have a saying, "We're all Wednesday, aren't we?" This routine provides an immense sense of psychological security and belonging when they are miles and miles away from their actual homes.
And that leads us into our final pillar in part 5, anchors in a liquid world and the idea of moral resistance. To really grasp why this loyalty matters so much, we have to zoom out and look at the world outside of football. The sociologist Zokmant Bauman coined this brilliant term, liquid modernity. It describes our current society perfectly, a society characterized by rapid change, transience, uncertainty, and the fragmentation of traditional identities like class or lifelong careers. In a liquid world, everything just feels temporary. You might change jobs, move cities, or see your local high street completely transformed. For these traveling fans, the football club is their solid anchor in this liquid world. Their travel is actually a form of moral rebellion, driven by a nostalgia for a stable past. They are actively choosing enduring loyalty to an institution founded in 1867 over temporary modern trends. By standing up, singing, and refusing to be passive, they're maintaining what sociologists call actively residual working-class traditions. They're fighting to keep their culture alive against a massive wave of corporate sanitization. So, what does this all mean for the future? As the modern game continues to become increasingly sanitized, corporate, and, let's face it, expensive, will the passionate, traveling away fan eventually become a relic of the past? Or, by continuing to build their mobile homes and seeking out that raw, authentic connection, will they remain the last true pulse of the sport? It really makes you think about the enduring human need for tribal belonging, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.